Joining me on the More Than Your Age podcast is the founder of the Kitchen Table Apologetics, theologian, wife, mother, and author, Jennifer Blehm. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here today.
I'm so happy to have you. I'm thankful to get the opportunity to chat with you today, as I know your story will help a bunch of women and hopefully parents too. Our mutual friend Ashley is the one who introduced the two of us together, and she just thought that you would be a great guest for the show. And as soon as I chatted with you, I guess a few months ago, I was like, oh yes, Ashley is correct. So we'll give a little shout out to Ashley. Ashley, thank you for the connection. Excited to have you. So thank you again for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to all my Northwest Arkansas people. They are actually a big reason why I ended up kind of getting into what I'm doing. They always encouraged me to write or do a podcast or something. So all my NWA people out there, just thanks for all the encouragement. And here we are.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. That's great. Well, I do want to start by getting to know you and your background a little bit, just you as a woman and who you were before you became a mom or even married. And so if you would just share your educational and career background and what were some of your aspirations as a young woman post high school or post college?
Oh, wow. We're digging deep. Well, I actually got married super young. I met my husband my first day in college, and we became pretty good friends right off the bat, and we ended up getting married right after my sophomore year of college. So we're college sweethearts. And so July will actually be 18 years that we've been married, which feels insane because I'm pretty sure I'm still 23, but we met in college, and actually in my undergrad, we went to a small Free Will Baptist College in Moore, Oklahoma. Back then it was called Hillsdale Free Will Baptist College. Now it's Randall University. And he ended up graduating with theology, and I majored in foreign missions. And I really had a heart and a passion for going overseas. And we actually traveled overseas a couple times together. And one of those trips was right after we got married and moved to Tulsa. We went to Japan and really just fell in love with it. And felt like God had really called us to go be missionaries to Japan. And so that was kind of the trajectory that our life was on. And it was just, it was the wildest thing because we spent about 2 years planning and trying to sell our house and trying to sell some of our belongings and all of these things to go on the mission field. And it was almost as if God, like we had so much confirmation that God had said yes and opened that door. And we were so excited, but that was a hard decision to be obedient in. So then when God closed the door, we were really shaken, and I struggled a lot with like this big identity crisis. You know, I got my degree in foreign missions, and I was planning to go be a missionary, and I had a heart for missions, and I wanted to go make an impact in people's lives and make an impact on the kingdom of God. And so when I felt like God had shut that door, I didn't know where my identity was. Like, who was I as a person if I wasn't a missionary? And this was before we had children. And right around this time, I got pregnant, and I ended up having a really traumatic miscarriage. And I went into a very dark season of my life, and I started just doing a lot of self-exploration, and started to really kind of come to this idea that my identity is really not rooted in what I do or the labels that I have. My identity is rooted in who I was created to be. And so I think from that moment on, that was a really crucial moment in my life that I had to decide, okay, this is one of those faith moments where I need to choose. Am I going to follow Jesus, or am I going to, be swallowed up by all of this darkness? And I chose to follow Jesus. And that took my faith to such a deeper level. And so then I started to come to this realization that my identity really isn't in being a wife. My identity really isn't in having the label as missionary. Who did God create me to be? And so I feel like that opportunity, kind of coming out of that darkness, God really used that for his glory and used that to do a good work in my life, to show me like, I created you for something unique, and I created you for something beyond just the boxes in your life that you can check. So then I kind of went on to work a couple of different jobs. I worked at a Christian school here in Owasso for about 5 years. And I worked with the elementary and preschool kids. And then I left that job and I ended up getting hired at a university here. And they had a fantastic tuition program. And my husband was very excited. The plan was never for me to go get another degree. And my husband ended up signing up for this program that this university offered. And it was a master's degree in theology and apologetics. And my husband is like hot nerd. He loves school. He's always studying, always reading. He's always doing some kind of writing and submitting papers to be published in journals and speaking at conferences. And so he's like this big academic guy. And I'm just not that way. And so I was like, I'm so excited for you. I can't wait for you to do this master's degree. And then about a month or two before he was about to start, I kind of last second decided, I think I'm going to jump in and just do this with you if you're okay with it. And so we ended up joining the same program and did this master's degree together, which was really, it was a really cool thing for us to be able to do together. But God really took him a completely different direction in his career goals and in his academic goals. And so my husband ended up doing another master's degree. He did a PhD, which is what took us to Arkansas. And I stopped there. And I felt confident that, after I graduated with that master's degree, I felt like I'm done with my educational journey. I still feel that way, by the way. There's not some big aha moment like I'm working on another degree, because I am not. But then what ended up happening was I actually quit my job to be a stay-at-home mom. And we had 2 children at the time. And I struggled with identity again. If I'm not a working mom, who am I? I had always been a working mom. I had just gotten this college degree and I was going to go do something great with it. And I felt like it was definitely a nudge of the Holy Spirit to say, "Hey, why don't you go do this degree?" And I really didn't want to, but I did it and I ended up loving it. And when I felt like it was time to leave my job to homeschool my kids, I was like, what do I do now? I've got 2 college degrees. I have a degree in missions, which I'm obviously not using. And then I have a degree in theology and apologetics. I'm also not using that one. So who am I and what am I doing? I'm staying home and I'm wiping noses and handing out snacks. And I kind of struggled with feeling like this role of being a mom and taking care of the home wasn't big enough. And I had to do a lot of inner work to realize that, number one, that was truly just my pride, wanting to make a great name for myself. That feels like an ego issue for me. And not to say that good things don't come from people wanting to do big and great things. But for me, that was a moment of like, is that who I'm meant to be? Am I meant to be somebody who just makes a great name for myself? And that's what I'm supposed to do. So fast forward a little bit and, we're living in Arkansas from 2019 to 2022, I think, if I'm remembering right. And we went through a lot during that time, and coming back to Tulsa, I felt God just like whispering to me, you feel so strongly about what it means to disciple your children, but not every parent feels strongly about that, but they should. If moms and dads proclaim to be followers of Jesus and they are not passing those values on, if they're not actively seeking to instill those same values and those truths in their children, then what are they doing? And so what I found through a lot of conversations with a lot of different people is that not everybody knows how to do that. Not everybody knows what it means to make disciples. Not everybody knows what it means to be able to defend their faith. Not everybody knows how to go and find the evidence. And so that's kind of how I got to this place that I am right now, is just kind of, through a weird long string of events and life circumstances, I kind of came to a place of like, well, who am I and what do I have to offer, to people around me, to the world? In this season of life that I'm in right now, what kind of value can I add to other people's lives? And so that is kind of, how the Kitchen Table Apologist account was born. So that's kind of where we are today.
So you shared so many different nuggets that I kind of want to go back and to address, and then we will definitely get into where you are now. So one of the things that you said way back when you and your husband were talking about being missionaries in Japan, you mentioned that the door, there was an obvious closed door. What was so obvious about this closed door for the two of you when you said just before, we felt like we knew that this was what we were supposed to do, and then it was nope, not anymore. What happened?
Yeah, that's it. That was kind of an interesting season of our life. Our marriage, we had been married for a few years, but we didn't have children. And, before you have kids, you're still kind of like figuring things out. And so we were navigating a lot of things in our marriage. And I think that my husband and I are both very opinionated about things. We're both very firm in what we believe. We have the same core values, but we have a lot of different opinions on how, we approach different life things and different circumstances. And so that creates a lot of conversation in our house. But I think for us, a big indication of when we know that God is speaking to us is he gives us both the same confirmation. He gives us both the same idea. And so when it's a matter of, should we move here? Should we do this? Should I take this job? It's usually like, it usually goes something like, hey, this job opening came up. And then the other person chimes in and says, that would be perfect for you. I've been praying for something just like that. Or I feel like God has been telling me that was going to be the next step for us. And so usually between the two of us, that's kind of how God operates with us, is that one person kind of confirms already having listened to God, what God is already doing, and the other person is already speaking to the other person. And so, when we went to Japan, it was one of those things where just getting there, we felt at home, and it's hard to explain like how you get somewhere and feel at home in a place that you've never been, that's so different from your culture. But both of us just felt like we want to be here. We want to live here. We want to work in these people. And and then a lot of conversations with the missionaries, and just a lot of weird encounters and things that really confirmed that that's what we were supposed to be doing. And then we spent over a year praying specifically, is this the direction that you want us to go? Is this the direction you want us to take our life? Because it was going to be, it was going to be really like earth shattering for a lot of people in our life for us to go and do something like this. So we didn't take the decision lightly. And we ended up, told our family, told everybody in our life. It was common knowledge, at that point, that we were going to go be missionaries in Japan. And it was one of those things where I feel like God just removed all of, it's hard to describe, but God just kind of removed all of the peace from the situation. Where before we were operating in this constantly being confirmed in what we were doing, like, okay, we're going to take the next step and we're going to pray about it. Okay, we're going to put our house on the market and we're going to pray about it. Lord, is this still the thing that you want us to do? And we kept being met with open doors and yes. And through all this time, yes, yes, yes. And then finally, I think we just reached a place where we were like, okay, we're 100% we're going for this. We had all of the ducks in a row, and there was nothing stopping us. And then our house would not sell in a market where houses were selling. Like, and we had, I mean, for our price point and in our area, like there's no reason our house shouldn't have sold. And we couldn't leave until that had happened. And so we tried and tried for about a year. We did, different renovations, and we, did some updates and stuff like that to make it more marketable. And we didn't even get any viewings on it, which is amazing to like not have any viewings on our house. I mean, it was basic, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,300 square feet, in it at a good price point. It's like those houses go, they don't stay on the market. And so, we ended up switching real estate agents. So we pulled our house off the market for a little while, and we took some time to do some more updates. And then we put our house back on the market. We relisted with a different agent. Real estate agents, cover your ears, because I'm sure you guys probably do not like this. But we went with a different agent. Our second agent was actually like a friend of a friend and was recommended. And, it was one of those things where it was like, if you're going to sell your house, like she's the one to do it for you. So we relisted our house. It was several months later, and our house was on the market for almost another year. And still no bites. And we're like, okay, we're not crazy, right? The house was wild when we first moved in, and we did a lot to update it. And it was just this creepy old weird house. And we did a lot to like make it look nice and clean it up and freshen it up. And we painted every single room and did all these things. And so the fact that we didn't even get any views at all was outstanding. And so that's just one of those things where it's like, we would have been on a plane as soon as the house was, sold. And as soon as we had everything, all the green lights, we would have been on a plane, no problem. Like our hearts were there, our intentions were there. That's what we were going to do. And so I feel like this was God saying, okay. And, truthfully, if I'm being honest, I still don't know why he said no. I still don't know why that door closed, except that sometimes God operates in a way to kind of see where our heart is at. Where's our obedience at? What are we willing to do? How bought in are we for having an impact on the kingdom? And so, I think, and also it's one of those things too, that it's like, we're not the only people desiring to go be on that mission field. And what's so interesting is I actually have good friends right now who in a few months are moving to that very area to go work with the same people that we were going to work with. And so, it's like there's so many inner workings that we don't understand that God has his hand in. And I think the important lesson that I took away from that season of life was that as a follower of Jesus, I have to always be willing, and I have to always be prepared to be obedient in every step that he's wanting from me. And he will show favor in those seasons. And so, when the door closed, we grieved hard on that because we were already mentally, we were already there. And so missing out on that was hard because I felt like I lost a piece of who I was. And then I had to completely pivot the whole plan for my life. I think by this point we had already had our first child, and she was a baby at this point. And I think when God said no, I was like, okay, well, what do we do now? And so I struggled with that. Who am I? Am I even, am I doing what you want me to do? What is it that you want me to do? I thought I was supposed to be a missionary. And so that was a real growth period for me and for both of us in our life and in our marriage. And I feel like it's almost harder to trust God when you don't know the next step than it is to trust him when you do know the next step. Even if that step is a hard one to take, at least you can see the path forward. But trusting God when you have no idea where that path is leading can be a real struggle. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would imagine that, especially like you said, for 2 years, well, 2 years your house was on the market, but then before that, you had all this time preparing. And like you said, you studied foreign missions. So this, and it was on your heart, both of your hearts to go out and serve in Japan. And so this, like you said earlier, this identity was taken from you of what you thought you were, right? And then you also said the same thing when you left your full-time job to stay home with your kids and then eventually start homeschooling. It's like, okay, now my identity and who I was working, like you had to redo that again. And I love what you said earlier, where you said my identity is not in what I do, but in who I was meant to be or what I was created to do. Because I think that's so huge for people to realize. Like I even the other day had this conversation with some family members where they were saying, well, no, whatever their profession was, like, I'm a teacher. I teach. That's who I am. And it's like, well, yeah, part of you, you maybe are created to teach in some capacity, but it's still like that profession is not who you are, but it's so hard to not get wrapped up in that. And so I just like, I think what you even said with like having to deal with that multiple times is we can all relate to, because it's really hard, with all of that. And so I want to kind of also jump forward to another point in your life where I would imagine your identity or just like life in general was shifted when you shared with me that you got pregnant for your third child and things did not go as planned. Could you share, if you're open to it, what happened during this pregnancy and then how this specific situation just transformed your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were living in Arkansas at the time. And we had actually just moved there, and we had already been planning on having a third child. We always knew we wanted 3 kids. That was, kind of always part of our goals as a couple, I guess. And I ended up getting pregnant right after we moved to Arkansas, and I miscarried in early September. And we were brand new there. And so we had just met this group of friends. And so it was hard to navigate a loss like that in a new group of friends and kind of like lay something heavy like that on them. But they carried it so well and loved us well through that. And I ended up getting pregnant again. And again, I miscarried. And I went into a dark season, and we opted not to tell our daughters because they're so tenderhearted. And so I kind of like, felt like in our home, I kind of felt like I carried it alone a little bit, because my husband and I didn't share with our kids, that was going on. And so felt like I was grieving silently a little bit. And, one of the gentlemen in our small group who worked at the church that we attended suggested that I go to a grief share group. And I'm so thankful that he did, because I've ended up needing the tools that I learned in that program so much, and it has benefited me so much. And I ended up I kind of accidentally, because I told my husband, I said, I don't know if I can do this again. It's just too hard. And our girls need me, and they need a mom who's going to be present. And I just don't know if I can just keep going through loss after loss. And is it just time for me to say, like, we're only going to have 2 kids,
Yeah.
That was a struggle. So I was trying to like do some natural tracking, and
Yeah.
I ended up kind of like getting my dates mixed up, as one does. There are many people in the world today because of tracking wrong. And I got pregnant at the very beginning of COVID quarantine. March of that year, March 2020, I ended up getting pregnant. And I was honestly so scared. And I just feel like I started out the first part of that pregnancy and just completely burdened by fear. And my doctor put me on progesterone and stuff to kind of like help the pregnancy along, which it did. And so I was going through my appointments, and my girls were both born via C-section. And in Oklahoma, back when my girls were born, my first girl was born C-section because she was breech, and they did not want to try to do any maneuvers to turn her. And I didn't know, it was my first baby. I didn't know if there was anything I could do to change that. So she was born via C-section. And then when my second daughter was born, my provider did not do VBAC. And so I ended up having a second C-section. So fast forward to being pregnant with my third now. Late into my pregnancy, I just kind of felt like I really wanted to deliver it naturally. And I didn't know if it would be possible. You know, you had heard risks and stuff. And I ended up doing some research and found that the risk of having any kind of adverse event attempting a VBAC after 2 C-sections, depending on the kinds of C-sections you had an extremely high likelihood of success. And so I interviewed people and I did all this research, read medical journals, all these things. And so at about 32 or 33 weeks, I changed hospitals. I changed providers. I went to a hospital, to an OBGYN, and a whole team of people who supported this decision. And I do want to say for the record that the research does support a VBAC after 2 C-sections, but it's one of those things that you kind of have to, look at it from all angles. And I spent the majority of my pregnancy anticipating a repeat C-section. So they weren't tracking me to, try to do a VBAC. So they weren't looking at the position of my placenta and all of those things. So, fast forward, I had a support team, I had nurses, a whole hospital, an OBGYN, all in favor of this decision. So it wasn't like I just charged forward with no support and no research under my belt. I just want to make that really clear. And I ended up going into labor one night, labored smoothly. And then my labor just kind of stopped. And then another day went by, and then the next night I went into labor again, labored really smoothly for several hours, and then my labor just kind of stopped. And then another day went by, and then on November 29th, I went into labor and my water broke. And so my bag was packed and everything. And so I was like, okay, well, it's time to go to the hospital. And so my contractions were like a minute long, a minute apart. So I was like, ooh, these are kind of quick and they're kind of strong. So let's go to the hospital. And what's interesting is I had actually planned to do a home birth. I had wanted to birth at home because I didn't want any interventions. I didn't want anything that they wanted to give me. I didn't want it. I wanted to go completely unmedicated, completely natural. And I had a friend that was, kind of supporting me through all this tell me, kind of late in my pregnancy, she said, the Holy Spirit has really told me that you should birth in a hospital. And I was like, oh, really? And she said, yes, you should definitely deliver this baby in a hospital, but still do unmedicated. They'll, the hospital I delivered at was very good about supporting unmedicated deliveries. And my doctor, my OBGYN, had told me, he said, I really think that you should get an epidural when you get to the hospital. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. That's actually the whole reason why I'm delivering this baby. It's going to be unmedicated. And he said, I really think you should get an epidural when you get to the hospital, because if they have to take you in for an emergency C-section in the middle of the night, there may or may not be an anesthesiologist available for you. And if it's a matter of, waiting or getting the baby out, they're going to get the baby out. They're not going to wait for anesthesia. So I was like, that seems scary. I'm going to keep doing what I want to do anyway. So So I go into labor, my water breaks, and I go to the hospital, and I'm doing well. I'm in triage. They're taking my paperwork, and I'm a loud, obnoxious person typically, but in labor, I was so calm and quiet, and which is very unlike my normal everyday demeanor. And so I'm laboring very smoothly, and they say, okay, well, we're ready to take you back to your room now. And we're going to check and see how many centimeters you are. So I was like, okay. So they leaned my bed back, and all of a sudden I started hyperventilating, and I just was my whole body just locked up in the most intense pain I could ever imagine. And it was nothing like my contractions. And I broke out into like this horrific sweat and I started shaking uncontrollably and I was crying and I started getting really nauseous. And they bring me to my room and I'm basically convulsing and I make it into the bathroom and I'm sitting on the toilet and I'm like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And so I'm trying to, make it past this, but this pain is unrelenting. Contractions are really kind of a roller coaster ride and, they hit a peak and then they die down and they peak and they die down. And this was just not quitting. And if anything, it was getting way worse. And so I got on my hands and my knees after about 15 minutes and I crawled to the hospital bed and I'm on the floor and I'm thinking, this is transition. I'm about to have this baby. And so I'm like, I can make it through. I can breathe through this if I'm about to push this baby out. And so I'm like, I really need an epidural. And they're like, okay, are you sure? Because, we know you don't want an epidural. And I'm like, no, I can't breathe. I can't move. I can't do anything. And my muscles are just locked up. So I need you to give me an epidural. So I get up on the bed and they check me and I'm thinking she's going to be like, you're at 14 centimeters and this baby's coming out right now. And she goes, as gently as possible, she goes, you're at a 3. And I was just like, I wanted to pack it in and just go home and, not do this. So I was like, okay, that's fine. So they came in and she confirmed, she said, okay, you're sure you want to get an epidural? And I said, yes, I want you to give me an epidural, just a little bit to take the edge off. So that's what she did. She's like, okay, I'm going to give you as little as possible, bare minimum. I could still move my legs. I could still roll around and get into different positions. And so I spent that whole night trying to get into position and kind of rolling from one side to another side and trying to keep contractions going and trying to get the baby into a better position and all of these things. Well, throughout the night, I was having this really intense shoulder pain, so bad that I kept telling the nurse, I said, my shoulder hurts. Am I having a heart attack? And it was just so concerning. And then I would go through these bouts where I would start shaking again, just really uncontrollably. My mouth would be clenched together and I would just be shaking violently. And so I spent the majority of the night going from shaking to shoulder pain and then trying to get the baby into a position. And then sometimes I would just doze off, and wake up and start the whole process over again. And they would check me and they'd be like, okay, you're at a 5. Okay, you're at a 6. You're at a 7. And they come in and it's the wee hours of the morning. I think probably 3:30, 4 in the morning. And they come in and my son's heart rate had been kind of acting very bizarre and it was going up and down and it was all over the place. And I started to get concerned. And so I said, do we need to be worried about this? What's going on? And they're like, well, it is going up and down, but he's doing okay. So let's press on. So I was like, okay. So, the nurse came in and checked me and the doctor came in right behind her. The OBGYN that was overseeing, my labor that night. And he said, okay, it's time for a C-section. You're at 9.5 centimeters. And I was like, and I had felt all of my pain shift on top. And so I was like, I'm getting ready to push. I feel like I need to be pushing right now. And he said, nope, you're not. We're taking you for a C-section right now. So I was like, and then, everything stopped, all my contractions and everything. My body just, pushed pause. And so I was devastated because I had worked all night and I'd been preparing for weeks. And getting in the right mental headspace. And so I was heartbroken and my husband just looked at me and he was like, it's fine. It's fine. You're going to get a C-section and they're going to get the baby out and it's going to be fine. You did all the hard work all night and just let them do this. And so he was so chill about it, which is just who he is. And I appreciate that so much. And, so they wheeled me in and, I still had a little bit of the epidural and the anesthesiologist said, you still have some of the epidural. We're going to put in a spinal block to do the C-section. But if at any point you start to not feel good or you need anything, I can give you a sedative that will help just relax everything. And I was like, I'll be fine. This is my 3rd C-section. I don't need a sedative. So we get in there, and when they laid my bed back again, I felt that same exact pain from when they took me to my room at the very beginning of the night. And I started shaking and I started sweating again. And I looked at the nurse and I said, I'm going to be sick. And at that point, I just started like violently throwing up. And they laid me back and they started prepping me for surgery. And when they dressed my abdomen, I just lost control of myself, and I just started screaming at the top of my lungs. And I have a decently high tolerance for pain, but it felt like they were sawing me in half, and they were just pressing, the whatever surgical material on me to get me ready for surgery. And then they went to lift me to the surgical table, and I started screaming again. And I don't know why, but at that point, the doctor just snapped into, turbo mode, and he starts yelling, and he said, we have to get this baby out right now. And so they said, okay, we're getting your husband in. He's going to be in here, but we're going to have to get started. So they said, okay, I administered the spinal block, and the anesthesiologist is, right here by my head, and she's walking me through everything. And she said, I put the spinal block in. We're going to have to get started soon. And she said, the doctor is pinching your abdomen. Can you feel that? And I said, yes. And she said, okay, we're going to give it another minute. And she said, he's pinching in a different spot. Can you feel that? And I said, yes. And she said, okay, we can't wait anymore. We have to get the baby out.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, and so exactly what my doctor told me was going to happen is what happened. We couldn't wait for the spinal block to take full effect. And so they started opening me up. And, but at that point I was in so much pain already that it was like, just a little bit more. And so, I remember they kind of started opening me up, and as I could feel them, cutting, I was like, I need that sedative right now. Put that sedative in my veins. And so she said, okay, it'll take, a minute or whatever. So I remember my husband came in, and I was starting to get drowsy. Drowsy is the word I'm looking for. I was starting to get drowsy. And my husband came in and he grabbed my hand and he said, okay, it's going to be okay. You're doing great. And I remember they pulled my son out, and I was starting to kind of doze off from the medicine, but I heard them yell and say, we need to get her husband out of here right now. And so they shoved my husband out of the room, and they knocked me completely out. And I didn't see my son. I didn't hear him cry. And when I woke up, I was in a different room. And I was looking around. I was very confused, and I was still groggy from the medicine. And I said, what's happening? And she said, when we got the baby out, your uterus had ruptured, and your baby had come out of your uterus and into your abdomen from the waist up. His head and his shoulders had come out of your uterus and into your abdomen. And he's in the NICU, and I started freaking out, and I started crying, and I said, is he okay? And she said, yeah, he's okay. He's alive. And I said, okay, have you talked to my husband? And she said, no. And I said, does my husband know I'm alive? Yeah. And she said, I don't know. And I said, you need to go send somebody, go find my husband and tell him I'm alive. And so she went, found him, told him everything was okay. And so it ended up being about 12 hours before I could see my son. But, looking back, what ended up happening after doing research, the shoulder pain and the shaking and all of that was indicative that my uterus had started to rupture at the beginning of my labor. And it just ended up finishing rupturing when they wheeled me into the operating room, when they laid my bed back. And I could pinpoint the moment that it happened because I felt it. Mm-hmm. And I remember about a week later, when a traumatic event happens, you kind of dissociate from it. And that's just really mentally and emotionally, it's just kind of a coping mechanism. And I think I had kind of disassociated from what had happened. I downplayed it. Yeah, that had happened, but we're fine. Everything's fine. It wasn't that big of a deal. And I was sitting in a doctor's office at a follow-up visit about a week after we got out of the hospital. And I was kind of downplaying what happened. And the doctor was like, so tell me about, his birth. And I said, well, my uterus ruptured. And I kind of saw this look hit his face. And I was like, and, he had been a doctor for 30 years. And I was like, you probably have patients that this has happened to, right? And he said, 0. I've never had patients in this office that this has happened to. And I was like, really? And he goes, you're lucky that you're both alive right now. Wow. And my mom and I just started sobbing uncontrollably, as one does. And I remember just really kind of coming to the full realization of what had happened. And then my husband ended up telling me shortly after that, he said, yeah, the last thing I heard before, right as the doctor was kicking me out, was that he was telling somebody to bring in a crash cart. And I was like, okay. So that was a little bit more serious, I think, than I had fully understood at that point, what had really happened. And I struggled. For a little while, I entered this kind of euphoric state, of just being really thankful that I'm alive. And then for a little while, I struggled with survivor's guilt a little bit for me and for my son, and then struggled with just this very heavy guilt of feeling like I had put us both in danger. I had put myself in danger of my husband having to raise our children alone, and my girls not having a mother for the rest of their lives, and I put my baby in danger, and I struggled with all of this guilt. And I kind of came to this moment where I think God said, you have two choices here. You can either continue to spiral into this, almost this like self-loathing of like, what have I done? And like, I could have killed both of us by my decisions and all of this. Or you can look at it from this perspective of like, you tried to do something, you made a well-informed decision, and you tried to do something and it went very badly. And I spared you, and I spared your son, and you can use that to push you into this next season of your life. And that's what I did. I decided to make this a moment of like, I'm going to see each day as a gift. I'm going to see the opportunity to disciple my children and the opportunity to do things differently and to love my husband better and to love my children better and to try to walk more deeply in purpose and to root myself more deeply in Christ. I'm going to choose to do that instead of going down this path of darkness and, hating myself for what could have been. I'm going to allow this to be a moment in my life that I look back and say, I remember the day that I realized what a gift life really is. And, I wish I could tell you that out of that, I'm the perfect wife and the perfect mom, but that could not be further from the truth. But it has definitely given me just this fresh set of eyes of what am I doing with the days that I'm given? Am I squandering my days on things that don't matter? Or am I using the days that I'm given on this earth as a gift and I'm living them with intention? And that's what I try to do most days anyway. And I've tried to, I've been a Christian since I was like 7, but I've tried to just take it so much more seriously now. Just watching how God has orchestrated so many things in my life. And it hasn't always felt good, but it has always been for my good and for his glory. And so, but that has to be a choice on my part. It can be a moment of darkness that spirals me into darkness, or it can be a moment where I say, God, I glorify you for all the things that you've done and for doing something so incredible. And even on those days where things don't go how I want them to go, you're still good and you're still on the throne. Because birthing my son was definitely one of those moments. It was traumatic and it was good all at once. Yeah. And so that's been such an interesting turning point in my life, I think.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you sharing that story because it's a hard one, and like you said, I really think it's important for people to understand too that when after the fact, when you realize, like in the moment, I know it was scary and traumatic, and then after the fact, realizing the severity of everything that like you could have your life could have been gone, but your life was spared, your son's life as well, but his life was spared. And that instead of like, yes, you had to grieve, you had to do all the things you needed to do, but then at one point realizing, no, this, like, I can go down this path and it can take me into a dark spot, or I can use that for good, for God's glory, and for a purpose. And so I think that's, it's, you can, for anybody, they can go one of two ways. And the fact that in your situation, your circumstance, you chose to go to the path of just following the Lord, seeking after him, and bringing glory to his name. And so with that, you had already obtained your degree in apologetics. And, now it's like, okay, I want to focus on being a better mother, be more present wife, be just present in general, and like realize, and like you said, am I perfect? No, nobody is, but just like realizing the importance of that. And so you have this realization of how valuable your life is. Again, another identity shift. And you also mentioned previously that you wanted to create a resource where you're equipping parents and helping teach them, how to talk to their kids about Jesus, about the Bible. And so at what point within the mix of all of this, how did this idea that you had, like this vision that you had, like I knew you had it for a while, where did it all play in? And kind of walk us through the next steps with everything.
Yeah. So, I've always loved kind of painting a picture with words, just even on my personal account. I love telling a story. And, I sometimes, inspiration will strike, and just on my personal feed, I'll kind of get on there and just share my thoughts. And, over the years, people have been like, you should write, you should do this. And my friends in Northwest Arkansas were like, no, seriously, you really should be using this. You should be using this. This is a gift. And, I kind of felt like, yeah, but it's not really my season. And so I just started to pray about it. And I was like, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? I mean, if there is something that you have put inside of me, or if there is some kind of gifting or some way that I say something that's going to hit people differently, you're going to have to show me how to use it, because I have no idea. And so I kind of started writing a book, but it was kind of here and there and everywhere, and it didn't really have a goal, and it didn't really have a target audience. And I had no idea what I was trying to communicate in it. So, I didn't go very far with that. And so I just really started feeling like, and then when we moved back to Oklahoma, I have had a lot of conversations with other moms and with my own children at our kitchen table. A lot of living happens at our kitchen table. A lot of people drinking coffee and having deep conversations and eating meals and playing games. And it is definitely it's a highly trafficked place in our house. And I've had multiple people over this last year say, you need to develop a resource for parents, because you have this information and you have this training, and you need to develop this. Other parents like us really need this. And so I think it just clicked for me hearing a friend of mine say, I really need what you have to offer. And I know other people need it too. Because sometimes when you're not really sure what you're doing, or you have this passion or this idea, you can talk yourself out of it and think, well, what do I have that really adds value to other people's lives? And I don't want it to be a waste of time. And I don't want to fail, and I don't want people to look at it and say, the world doesn't really need that, because that can be sad and very discouraging. And so I started to pray about it, but I honestly had no idea how to do it. So one of my friends, one of my good homeschool mom friends said, well, why don't you do webinars, record videos teaching this information, and then post it online, and people can, pay to get into this class and do this. And I didn't know how to do any of the steps. I'm very technologically challenged. And so I said, okay, well, if I do this, you're going to have to help me. And then kind of one thing led to another. And I had another friend from a completely different season of life sharing about digital marketing. And I thought, hey, it would be nice to, make some extra money. And the apologetics thing was on my back burner for a little while. And so I was like, I want to try this and I want to just kind of help our budget a little bit. So I got into this, and instantly, as soon as I started taking these marketing classes, God was like, no, this is how you are going to do this other thing that I've been building in you for so long. This is the avenue that you're going to use for that. And so it's interesting because now I have both of those accounts going, and my digital marketing account, and I'm probably not supposed to say this, but my digital marketing account is not experiencing the reach and the growth that my apologetics account is. Getting thousands of views on these reels and getting lots of interaction, and lots of people that I don't even know are being impacted by this. And so it's just I've always been a believer that when you step in obedience, that God shows favor. And I think that this is just a glaring example of God saying, this right here, this is the thing that I have been fueling in you for a long time. And now it's time for you to take off with it. And so it's been exciting and fun to kind of watch it happen. But so great to feel like I lived in so much mystery for, honestly, years now. Like, okay, God, you keep telling me to do this thing. Like, I have something that parents need, but how do I do that? And he said, okay, well, here's a tool that's going to show you how to do it. So now you don't have any more excuses. So that's kind of how I got to this place. Just a lot of people kind of speaking into me, and God using their voices to kind of say, this is the direction I want you to go. This is how you're going to use that training that I asked you to do so many years ago. This is what that's funneling into, and why you needed that back then. So
I love it. Could you share for people who don't know what the Kitchen Table Apologetics is? And then if anyone doesn't know what apologetics is, just kind of explain so they know what it is that you are doing. And then I do want to use this time as well. You have an ebook coming out. And so just share about what that project is too, so people can kind of learn and understand. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. So first of all, apologetics is being able to defend your faith. The Bible tells us you should always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks for the reason for the hope that you have, doing this with gentleness and kindness. And we are living in a time where we have to be able to speak to, why do I believe that God exists? I don't just believe it because the Bible says it. I believe it because the evidence of the world supports it. The evidence of the natural world and science support the existence of God. It makes sense. It is a logical belief. It is not blind faith for me. And why do I believe in the resurrection of Jesus? Well, again, historical data and science, and it goes beyond just the pages that are in the Bible. Being able to train people in that information is so crucial. We are living in a time where you have to know why you are a follower of Jesus. We are done with being a culture of people who can just say, I go to church and I read the Bible and I just have faith and I just trust that. You have to be able to know why that is. You have to know why the Bible makes sense. And especially as parents, I've gotten so many heavy questions from my children. Even in the last few months, we lost my grandma in April, and my oldest daughter has struggled so deeply with that, and it has rocked her faith in a big way. She'll be 12 next month, and so seeing her faith really take on its own form, but also hearing her wrestle with some really deep stuff. And just being so thankful that I am rooted in my faith, and I do know the evidence, and I do know why I believe what I believe. And I am 100% convinced that Jesus raised from the dead. And I'm 100% convinced that we were created by God for a purpose. And I can back that up with more than just the Bible. And I believe that every parent who's a follower of Jesus needs to be able to do the same. And you can. The evidence is out there, and we should not be afraid to go research that. We should not be afraid to dig in and get curious and ask those tough questions, because the truth will point you back to the cross. The truth will point you back to God. I think people in the church are afraid to ask those tough questions because they're afraid that the answers to those questions will point them out of the church and away from Jesus. But the opposite is true. You just have to know how to do it. And so I was blessed to be able to get to go to school and get that training in our master's degree to know how to sort through all of the ocean of information that's out there and all of the different opinions. So being able to equip every parent to be an apologist and to defend why they believe what they believe, and to also raise their children to think critically and being able to give a response themselves at young ages. If you ask my daughter right now why she believes in God, why she believes in Jesus, she will not tell you because her parents take her to church. She won't tell you because her parents told her to. She'll give you reasons. And that, I feel like, should be the goal of every parent. And that's why I'm so passionate about this. So the Kitchen Table Apologist is geared specifically to equip parents with that kind of information, to handle heavy conversations, to be able to answer in confidence, to be able to go on that journey with their kids if they're still undecided in their faith, but they know they do believe in Jesus, but they don't exactly know why. Don't be afraid to go on that journey with your children. And so this account was born out of this desire for families to root themselves more deeply in the truth of Jesus, and in the cross, and in the credibility of the Bible, and to align themselves with those values. I am developing an ebook, and it is called 10 Days to Transformation. And so this is an interactive study for families, and it's going to be made up of a few different components. Each day is going to focus on a different topic. So day one, we're starting off with the existence of God, and different evidence and different pieces that help people understand that this goes beyond the pages of the Bible, and it stretches out into everywhere, science and history and nature, and all of these things point to God, our creator, and helping people understand that. Day two is evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, to help people understand that the resurrection of Jesus is actually the most logical explanation for why the tomb was empty. And so all of these things kind of building to this idea that if you follow this study, at the end of each day, there are going to be follow-up questions and biblical passages to read together. And throughout the study, there is historical and scientific data. And then at the end of each day, parents can engage in these follow-up questions with their children. Things like, what was hard for you to understand in today's study? What was something in today's study that seems impossible, or maybe was difficult for you to believe? Is there something that you feel like you need to do more digging on this particular topic, so that it's not just yes or no questions? Does this make sense to you? Is this something that you believe? I really want parents and kids to be able to have a dialogue about these topics. And so the goal is that at the end of the 10 days of transformation, the parents and their kids are more deeply engaged with each other, but they're also way more understanding of why they've placed their faith in Jesus. And I also have other materials that are going to be coming out as well. 10 Days to Transformation is the first ebook. I'm also going to be developing an entire study on biblical sexuality. That is a whole different topic in and of itself. So I'm actually not going to touch marriage and sexuality at all in 10 Days to Transformation, because I feel like the topic of sexuality is something that needs to be a longer ongoing conversation with our children, because there are so many different avenues in that need to be discussed as we prepare to send our children into adulthood. So yeah, the idea is just a library of resources so that parents can go and say, I need this and I need this material, and just choosing what they need to be able to disciple their children.
Yeah, what a valuable resource. I mean, I love that you have had friends in your life who have. I've seen this as a common thread among many people, among many women that I've interviewed, and just other friends that I've talked with in life. But just the thread of, you have these people that are in your life and they see something in you, and I believe that it's God using them to speak this into you of like, hey, you have this gift, you have this education in your background, and you can use this knowledge, this defending of your faith, to help other parents. And that's what you're doing. And I love that it's in the beginning phases and stages, because it's going to grow. I mean, I've already seen. It's been cool to see just on my end, we just kind of met in a way, and just being able to watch like the content and the resources that you're putting out there is so valuable. It's so helpful.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And then just this ebook that's coming out, I think I'm going to put all of this in the show notes as well, so that people can use it and obtain it as well. And I did have a question for you though. The ebook, is it geared towards a specific age, or is it, any age, or what age would you recommend for the 10-day transformation?
Oh, yeah, I'm still working through that, because I'm still kind of in the just putting the information on the page right now. And then I want to go back through and read through it. And my goal is, I'm writing this ebook from a place of, these are very real conversations that we've had around the table with our children. Our children's personalities are so different, because my middle child will ask me a question and I'll give her some information expecting a follow-up question, and she'll be like, okay, bye. But it's my older daughter who really does ask the very, very hard questions. And so we're always engaged in some kind of, exploring and digging in and trying to find answers. And she has really made me a much deeper thinker just by being her mom. And so I want to go back and really fine tune the conversation and the lingo in the ebook, so that it flows exactly how I've kind of communicated it to my children. But the idea is for it to be something that parents can scale for any age. And honestly, I'm a big believer in expose your children to the heavy, not the heavy information, keeping it age appropriate. There are some topics we still don't even talk about, even with our oldest. We have, dialed down some of the things that we've communicated about some of the things that are happening overseas right now, educating them, but also keeping it PG, if that makes sense. But I'm a big believer in, use the theological language, use the biblical language, use the big words and the heavy sentences. And when your children ask you what that means, that's a teachable moment. Does my 7-year-old know what the Trinity is? She knows who's in the Trinity, but she probably can't explain it to you. My oldest child knows vocabulary that my middle child doesn't know, but they hear us use these words. And so I think exposing them to some of this deeper theology and some of these deeper ideas, you can always come back and add in those explanations. And you can always come back and flesh that out a little bit more with them. As long as, you are doing it from a place of knowing your children and communicating it in a way that you think your children will understand. But I'm also going to have disclaimers in each of the sections that says, scale this conversation. If you think that your child may not understand this topic, adjust, make those little pivots. I just want it to be something where parents can walk in this confidence of, okay, now I know how to have these conversations with my children. I think we could definitely be setting the bar higher for our children and what they can understand. Their minds actually operate on a higher level than what most of us understand. And when they don't know something, they'll ask. My children don't always understand the vocabulary we use, and they'll ask, what does this mean? What does that mean? And these are teachable moments, and they are fantastic opportunities for our children's minds to develop in a way that is being exposed to the Bible and apologetics and theology. And you don't have to homeschool to be the kind of family that discusses these ideas at the kitchen table. You don't have to be private schooled to have deep conversations about God and His Word and the nature of Jesus and the relationship between them. And I think that we could be elevating that bar and that standard of how we're engaging our children in conversation.
Yeah. And something you said earlier too, that I think is important for if anyone's listening and they have children and they may say, well, I don't have a master's in apologetics. I don't know all the answers. It's like, well, there's a resource, that's why your resource is there. And for you to be open with your kids too and say, well, I don't know, let's learn together. And let's try to figure it out. I think that's really important because I've just heard too many parents all the time will say that as well. Like, well, I don't know. I mean, we'll let someone else teach them. And like you were saying, you can go to whatever type of schooling you go to, but still at your kitchen table, have those conversations and grow and learn with your kids. Well, so Jennifer, I have two more questions. I know we've kind of went a little bit longer than expected. And so we'll try to make these quick, but I think, we're talking about how, although you've had all this education and this life experience and these situations that have happened to you to kind of get you to where you are now. And you are in the beginning stages of what has been this passion of yours to help train other parents. And you're working on this ebook and you have other writings that are going to be coming down the line. And so, hopefully, this may or may not pan out monetarily, and it may pan out monetarily. And, you, as we mentioned too, you're speaking to people online or wherever it may be. What are you telling yourself as you're in the midst of these beginning, like the growth phases of everything, that this could be something huge that transforms thousands of lives, or maybe it'll just help hundreds of people or just, a couple people here and there, even though you already said thousands of people have seen different things. But what are you telling yourself as you're in this growth phase to kind of keep you going and to maybe not get discouraged or to just continue on?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think we all, especially in the social media age, we all want to go viral and we all want our stuff to blow up and break the internet and, be groundbreaking and impact the masses. I think for me, it's one of those things that I just envision, a couple of my friends who have said, I really need help having these conversations with my kids. And if it benefits just them, if it benefits just my kids, just one family, if one family ends up staying rooted in their faith and their children go off to college and they stay rooted in their faith and they maintain their relationship with Jesus through all the hardships of their life because their parents decided to buy an ebook and decided to pour into them and disciple them, I feel like that'll be worth it. if that is one more person who crosses the threshold of eternity, because their parents equipped themselves and now they are seated at the feet of Jesus together as a family, I feel like that will have been worth it. And I mean, truthfully, like I benefit from this so much, because it's such a good reminder for me. I wish that I could tell you that I was this big rock star that always had these great answers for my kids, but I'm very much still on the journey that I'm asking parents to also take. And I'm structuring this in a way that it makes this information digestible and attainable for every parent. The theology and apologetics world tends to use very, very heavy, dense language and vocabulary, and it can be hard for people who aren't fully immersed in theology to just pick up some of these resources and just read it and have it make sense. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to act as a translator and say, I was in this world for a little while, and now as a mom, I'm having to translate this to my children. So I want to make it feel digestible for everybody else too. It shouldn't feel like theology and apologetics is just for this group of people. It should feel attainable to everybody. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping to do, is to make it feel not so overwhelming for people to be able to take on this task. And so I think that, I mean, the goal is really just even a small impact is better than nothing at this point. And that's kind of what I'm reminding myself. That's the goal, I guess.
Yeah, and like you said, just as long as it's one family that you're helping, which we know that has already happened, of just helping one family. So I think that's wonderful. Okay, my last question is the question that I ask everyone. So in your situation, because your life was spared, you decided to use it to help teach parents. And I know you had that idea because you had your master's before, but you just realized like there's more purpose in life because of your specific life circumstance. So you were not limited to something tragic that happened to you. If you could encourage one woman who does feel blocked or limited to pursue a goal or a dream based on her age or life circumstance, whether it's tragedy or just situational, what would you tell her?
I think I would say that so much goodness comes from this season of our life. We often think of, the 20s as being these people who are energized and they're trailblazers and they have all these big ideas and they're movers and shakers, and that is true. But for me personally, I have felt like coming into this season of my life, kind of staring down the barrel of 40, I'll be 40 before too long. And, we'll be celebrating 18 years of marriage. I feel like I'm such a wiser person now than I was 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. And I still have all the zeal and all the energy and the passion, but I also have the wisdom to pair with that. So if anything, I feel like this season is the season to be doing the groundbreaking and pioneering and blazing my trail and doing all these things and achieving these goals, because I feel like now I have the knowledge and I have the wisdom to see how the path forward should look like. And to also recognize the kind of balance that I need in my life to make those things happen while also managing all the most important things. And so I feel like, if anything, the middle age is really go time to really go and pursue those things, because now you've seen the world and you've seen people ahead of you and you see people younger than you trying to do these things, and you have this information and this knowledge and this wisdom, and you still have so much time or we think, I mean, really all we have is today, truth be told. Um, and I was in a training way back in the day when I was trying to be a missionary. I had to take a course, and I went to a training, and a guy was there who was in his late 50s, and I got to talking to him, and I said, "So what's your story? Like, what are you doing?" And he told me that he took this class because his grown kids were going to go be missionaries. And the class changed his life and made him see the world in a completely different way. And God put him on a totally different path in his life in his 50s because of this missions course that he took. And I just thought that that was amazing. And that has been, I mean, probably 15 years ago. And that has stuck with me. It is never too late. If there's breath in your lungs, it is never too late. If you have you ever read The Hiding Place?
No, but I've heard about it.
Okay, so The Hiding Place is a fantastic book about Corrie ten Boom and her family hiding Jews during the Nazi occupation and during the Holocaust. And she continued to do stuff until the day she died. I mean, well into her older age. I mean, her elderly years, when most people would be, sitting down and resting and calling it a day, she's out there still traveling and sharing Christ with the world and doing all these incredible things and talking about the goodness of God and what she went through in the concentration camp. And that has been a huge inspiration to me. After all that she went through and all that she lost, she made it her life's mission until the day that she died to go every day and do something for the kingdom of God. And living through what I went through has taught me that is what I should be doing every single day, until the day that I die. And that's not something that you retire from. And so start today, start where you're at. Are your kids grown? It's okay. It's not too late. If you're breathing, it is not too late.
Mm-hmm. Start today. Start where you're at. I love that. Jennifer, thank you so much. If people want to find you, they can reach out on the Kitchen Table Apologetics on Instagram, and I will link additional information for your ebook in the show notes, and anywhere else people can find you. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining the More Than Your Age podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was so great being here with you today.